Game 2 was a major turning point in the series. If the Sixers win, Miami faces the potential return of Joel Embiid and a shift in momentum. But with a Heat win, they established a cushion with the series moving back to Philadelphia. Well, Miami did their job, once again taking a big lead in the second half of the game with 4 players scoring 18 points or more, limiting James Harden and the Heat bench stepping up. We break down Miami's 119-103 win on today's playoff edition of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Heat Nation. It's a Thursday edition of Locked On Heat, your daily podcast covering all things Miami Heat. However, you may be listening or watching on YouTube, Odyssey, or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm David Ramil, and with me, as always, live from FTX Arena is my co-host, Wes Goldberg. Well, Miami knew what was at stake, just as they have all season. And while the Sixers started off Game 2 on Wednesday night with a renewed energy and purpose, Miami eventually followed a similar script in what they did in Game 1, keeping Philadelphia out of their comfort zone throughout the first half, then tightening the screws defensively in the third quarter to ignite their offense and pull away from the Sixers with a sizable lead. And while the flow of the game was similar to the first one of the series, this featured strong performances from 4 players. Bam Adebayo led the team with 23 points. Jimmy Butler had 22. And the newly crowned Sixth Man of the Year, Tyler Herro, chipped in 18. But on the day he celebrated his 30th birthday, the story of the game, Wes, for me, was Victor Oladipo adding 19 points, including 3 of 4 from three-point range, playing tough defense on James Harden, and helped seal a 119-103 win with the series, shifting back to Philadelphia for Friday's Game 3. I really enjoyed Oladipo's performance tonight.
Yeah, it was really enjoyable. The fact that it was on his birthday, like you mentioned, made it that much more fun, and he was really into it. And you could just the shift in Victor Oladipo's attitude has been so extraordinary, right? And while he's on the court in the post-game presser, it feels like the Heat have finally figured out how to use Victor Oladipo, when to use Victor Oladipo, right? They make sure that his minutes don't align that much with Jimmy Butler, but even when they do, it's good. It looks fine, and they're doing a good job of making sure it's only 2 of Jimmy and Vic and Bam Adebayo on the floor at all times, or at any given time, and that's been really working. The fact that Victor Oladipo is making his threes lately and is starting to get respected a little bit as a floor spacer, that obviously really helps too. But to me, bigger picture, this is sort of the Victor Oladipo that the Heat envisioned when they acquired him last season, right? Somebody who could be disruptive on the defensive end and be an enforcer on the offensive end, a guy who makes things happen with the drive and kick game. He's able to make that corner three. He's just been awesome for them, and I don't see him not being a part of the regular rotation anytime soon, right? In this series, It's a good series for him, or just going forward.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. We've been talking about this pretty regularly, but his impact has been such a positive one. And it's a good point that you make about what they were hoping to get from him. Like the acquisition of Oladipo, just what we saw in those 4 games he played last season before the injury took over again. He was attacking the basket, intercepting passes and passing lanes and things of that sort, playing tough defense, forcing turnovers, able to ignite the offense, ignite fast break opportunities, etc. That's what he was doing in today's game. Like he was just great. And on top of everything, he's also been much more comfortable as a catch and shoot player. He's a really great option, particularly from the corners. He hit at least a couple of threes from the corners. I think he hit one from the wing. But just as an option there, when Jimmy drives the ball, to your point, when Jimmy's on the floor, he drives to the rim and kicks it out to a wide open Oladipo. Tyler Herro did the same thing as well. So he's definitely become an option from long range, and it just helps when that shot is falling, especially when his level of defense. It wasn't there in Game 1. It was there in Game 2, and he was really the difference maker, I think.
Yeah, and he's just another guy that this Heat team has that can make a difference and can just have, a 1 or a 2 minute spurt where he just makes stuff happen. There was in that fourth quarter, he was so big in the fourth quarter. He had 2 straight stops on James Harden. The second one resulted in a transition bucket for him. Then he hits a 3 that prompted the arena to play Pepas, right? And then he hits another big 3 with 1:30 to go. To put the Heat back up 13 when they had gone a few straight possessions without getting a bucket. That was a really needed three from him, and it basically triggered Doc Rivers and Eric Spoelstra to put their, the Omer Yurtseven victory cigar lineups in, right? And
Yeah.
it's just another guy, and they have so many. Like Gabe Vincent had like a 1 minute spurt right in the first quarter. You obviously Tyler Herro and Bam Adebayo are carrying this team. Jimmy Butler is carrying this team, but there are so many guys that can do something like that where they could just get you a big bucket or make a big play on offense or on defense. And when you have more of those guys, like it's just very clear against Philadelphia, especially with Joel Embiid out, they don't have a lot of those dudes, right? And
Yeah.
this is why the Heat are so dangerous. They might not have that A+ level superstar, but they have so many of these guys, and that really matters. It's carried them this far.
Yeah, absolutely. Oladipo, big fourth quarter, as you mentioned. He played all 12 minutes in the quarter. 3 of 4, 2 of 2 from 3-point range. Also chipped in a couple of rebounds, finishing with 10 points in the period to go. 10 of his 19 points. So big night closing for him. That's the role we wanted him to see. We wanted him to be the closer. I think you asked him, right, whether or not he had envisioned himself as a closer, and his response was, "Look,
Yeah.
I just want to play." It makes a lot of sense for him at this point, but it also is a natural fit for him as a closer because of the
Right.
incredible defense. And again, I'm glad you brought up the depth because that really has been Miami's strength all season long. They had some strong performances from Tyrese Maxey in particular. Tobias Harris also stepped up just as he did in game one, but it was just exhausting for Philadelphia because Miami just keeps coming at you in wave after wave, and you don't know where it's coming from. It could be Bam attacking the paint aggressively, just as he did in game one. It could be Jimmy Butler when he's got that shot going, or he's getting to the line the way he always does. It could be Max Strus hitting a three. It could be Gabe Vincent, as you pointed out, and certainly Tyler Herro punching you in the face repeatedly with that. It just seemed like Tyler had really momentum breaking shots every time when Philadelphia was cutting the lead to like 6 or 8. Tyler would hit a three or ignite a fast break opportunity, toss a lob to Bam, something
That's been his
along those
job
lines.
all year. That's been his
Yeah.
job all year. This is why he's the sixth man of the year. Is when the rest of the Heat offense stagnates a little bit. It's like Tyler Herro is just the do-it-yourself offense, and there's not a whole lot of that, right? Like obviously you've got Jimmy Butler in the mid-range, his post-ups, he can make that kind of stuff happen. It's notable that Spo basically staggered Jimmy and Tyler all night, right? Because
Yeah.
when you don't have Kyle Lowry, you kind of just need to have one of those guys on the floor at all times. And Tyler Herro was really big running the point in the second half for Miami, especially with that pick and roll partnership with Bam that we've talked so much about in this series already. But to go back to Vic closing games, the reason I asked him that was because Miami's starting lineup is pretty much set, right? Obviously, we had the Duncan Robinson for Max Strus swap earlier in the season. Gabe Vincent starting for Kyle Lowry, but we pretty much know what the starting lineup is. You basically have a shooter with a point guard, and then Jimmy Butler, PJ Tucker, and Bam Adebayo. Victor Oladipo is not going to start games anytime soon.
No.
But the closing lineup has been sort of just up in the air all season long, right? As we've talked about all season long. And I think if Victor Oladipo were answering me truthfully, I think he would have said that a goal of his would be to close games, understanding that he's not, going to be starting games because it's just not an option right now. But it is an option to close games. And that's a real way to kind of put your stamp on not only your return from all these injuries, but also on this team, on the playoffs, on the league. And it's a contract year for this guy, right? Like
Yeah.
this is something that should matter to him. I think he was really pumped up being in there for basically the entire fourth quarter until the garbage time lineups came in.
Yeah, I hate to mention off-season topics, but you kind of hinted at it there. Like I'm starting to think that the Heat have to do whatever possible to try and retain him because he just brings such an
Yes,
added
yes.
element here.
That's the biggest difference. It is remarkable, right? Like we were talking about, do you even bring him back to where you are now? It's like,
Yeah.
How could you not bring him back? I mean, he's going to get, if he keeps playing like this in the playoffs, David, he's going to get some big offers from some desperate teams, I think. Not to say
Oh
you
yeah.
need to be desperate to get Victor Oladipo, but you might be desperate to offer him in something $15-20 million a year or something. I think that
Well,
that if he keeps, not right now, but if he keeps playing like this, that could be a possibility. The Heat have his bird rights. They can match anything. It is something to keep an eye on, but that is obviously an offseason type topic.
I've already heard from a different couple of locked on hosts about their respective teams and whether or not Victor Oladipo is
Name names, David.
No, I won't do that. I won't
What
drag them
teams?
through the mud. No, it doesn't matter. Let's just say they're both in the Eastern Conference, but that's all that matters. In any
Text
case,
me later.
yeah, the Heat played their game that they wanted to. They closed out game two. They're kind of downplaying it again to the bigger picture. They know what's at stake. When asked about Joel Embiid's potential return. Jimmy Butler, who knows him best, having been a former teammate,
Yeah.
Bam Adebayo, everybody expects him to be on the floor on Friday, so they had to take care of business. But we'll talk about whether or not Embiid's return impacts the series and to what degree it does, and whether or not Miami can continue to move forward and potentially close out this series against the Philadelphia 76ers in Philadelphia. But before we do that, just wanted to remind you that today's show is brought to you by BetOnline.net, your number one source for all of your betting stats and sports info. You can find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball, and this weekend's Run to the Roses as the Kentucky Derby's back. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts.
All right, thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure to check out the Locked On NBA Big Board. Host Rafael Barlow from NBA Draft Junkies and author of the NBA Big Board newsletter is joined by Richard Stamus, Sam Ferris, and Leif Thulin, giving fans an in-depth look into the NBA draft, mock draft, player rankings, and of course, Big Boards. It's free. It's available wherever you get your podcasts. We've got that winning feeling, David. What kind of cookies do we have cooked up today?
Well, I figure we could go back with the Milano cookies. Why not? Let's not change
You gotta be
things
kidding
up.
me.
No,
Three-
I am kidding. I am kidding. I went to.
It has been 3 straight wins. I don't know if it's the lucky Milano.
Yeah, I
cookies.
know. I'm sure somebody out there is going, why would you change anything when it's worked so well? No, I'm going to go with Nutter Butters. I don't know. I've never tried it myself, but I hear they're a popular brand of cookie.
I like a good Nutter Butter. I'm a big fan. So, all right, we got 10 Nutter Butters here to give out. We're going to start with, number one, Victor Oladipo has got to get a bunch of these credit cookies. We discussed him in the first segment. I'm giving him 3 Nutter Butters for the game. Okay. So that leaves us with 7 left. I'm going to Bam Adebayo, and I'm giving him 4. All right. That's not leaving me with many Nutter Butters left. Bam Adebayo, you know what? I'm giving him 5. I'm giving him 5. Yeah.
I say you're too high, and you say, you know what? Let's lean into it. Give him an extra one. 5. I mean, look, I get it.
5 Nutter Butters.
Yeah. DeAndre Jordan starting again for Philadelphia, and yet it didn't matter. Like, Bam was attacking him early on. He was attacking Paul Reed. He was just they didn't go to Paul Millsap the way that I expected them to. They went with the smaller players at the 5, but really George Niang he fouled out like in 10 minutes of play, and he continues to. He hit 1 3-pointer, but he's been a mess for the Philadelphia 76ers. But a lot of that was because Bam was just aggressive, pulling down rebounds. Fantastic night for him. Able to get to the free throw line 11 times, knocking down 9 of those. Great night from him. This is the version of Bam that everybody's wanted all season long.
It's the version of Bam that this series calls for, right? I mean, when you have no Joel Embiid in there and it is just DeAndre Jordan and Paul Reed. Poor Paul Reed. I mean, Bam Adebayo had Paul Reed on his heels. Didn't he, David?
Yeah.
I
wonder if he thinks he can still win this game. I don't know.
Right.
I'm sure you ask him. I'm sure he's pretty
fouls
confident
for Paul
about it.
Reed. Paul Reed had 2 fouls. Good for him. Good night for Paul Reed. Just 4 points, but only 2 fouls. Bam Adebayo was the best player on the floor, not just for the Heat, but in this game completely. Even with Tyrese Maxey scoring 34 points, and he was awesome tonight. Nothing to take away from him, but Bam Adebayo was a force on both ends. He made his presence felt on offense early in the game. He was hitting floaters. He was hitting the layups. He was making dunks. He was a huge lob threat. They had no answer for him. Moreover, David, I mean, this was a game where Miami made 14 threes. A lot of their other shots came from the mid-range. Most of their paint points were just Bam Adebayo, right? Like Tyler Herro had a couple layups here and there. Other than that, there wasn't a whole lot cooking in the paint for Miami. It was basically Bam, and it was one of those markers I'm watching as this game goes on. I never really thought the Heat were going to lose, but it was something I was a little worried about, right? I was like, boy, it kind of feels like if the Heat just go cold from 3-point range and from like that mid-range area, that the Sixers could really get back in this. But Bam never let it happen. He never let it happen. Number one, because he was so good defensively tonight, as he always has been, and has really ramped up his game even in the playoffs. Talk about a guy who's a little upset about not getting Defensive Player of the Year. But on the offensive end, he was making big buckets. He had that great lob to Jimmy Butler in the fourth quarter that really kind of sealed things for Miami, I thought. Just an awesome all-around game for Bam Adebayo. How many cookies do we have left? 3?
You got 3 left. Yeah, no, wait.
Oh,
No, you went
fine.
3 and 5, so you got 2 left, buddy.
All right,
One
I
and
got
one.
one to Tyler Herro and I've got one to Jimmy Butler. Both of them are awesome. I feel like Tyler Herro isn't getting enough cookies, but that's just some of the breaks when you're, third on my list of cookies, and I'm not really good at math or keeping track of things. 6 of 10 shooting, 18 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists. Kind of felt like he had more assists.
Yeah.
That pick and roll that was such a factor for Miami was sort
Yeah.
of the fulcrum of their offense in game 1. Just rinse, repeat game 2. This was the same game plan that the Heat used in game 1 to win game 1. It's the same exact game plan they used in game 2. Nothing really changed. Philly didn't really use any of the zone
No, not as
in
much.
this
No.
in game 2, and I thought that was notable. Like, as successful as it was in the
Miami did,
first half,
however.
they did. Miami did use quite a bit of zone, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
But yeah, it wasn't a situation where Doc Rivers was like that. That was basically Doc Rivers admitting, yeah, they fixed, they punched our zone, they figured it out. We're not going back to the first half of game 1. That's just not in the cards for us. So we're just not going to do it. Tyler Herro and Bam Adebayo. You know what? I'm going to give them. I'm giving them all like 9 cookies or whatever it is that adds up, and they can just share the cookies. And they love each other so much they can just decide who gets how many Nutter Butters. Okay, that's it.
You
And
know
then
what?
Jimmy Butler was awesome.
You should take extra cookies away from whatever Doc Rivers' stash of cookies might be, because like this guy, like I know we've said it before. Like I know Heat fans probably don't want to hear us. We enjoy talking to Doc. Everybody likes Doc, etc. Whatever.
Yeah.
Doc's fine. But man, I have not seen a coach lack such the ability to change things or respond or do things differently. Like once he digs his heels in, he's gonna dig his heels in, and it's probably going to cost him the series. Again, I'm not going to go so far as to predict a sweep, unlike some
It's a little.
people on
I
this
think that's.
podcast.
I'm not disagreeing with you necessarily in the big picture with Doc, but I think that's a little unfair to Doc in this series because he doesn't have Joel Embiid and because James Harden is not the player he thought he was probably getting in that trade.
That's
It's a
fair.
little. I don't know what other options that he has, but I under like he was going to get outcoached in this series regardless. Like that was just going to happen, and I really like that Eric Spoelstra just kept doing what worked. Right? Like there was no reason. The Heat haven't changed anything for like 2 rounds so far. Like defensively, they're doing the same thing to Harden, what they did to Trae Young. Offensively, they're shifting things a little bit here and there, and that's might be a little unfair. But for like overall schematically, like they're not for a team as versatile and with so many looks that they could throw out. This is a team that knows itself. It knows its identity. It knows what works. It knows what levers to pull and when during the game. And they've rolled now to 2 straight wins in this series.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Harden. Bigger night for him. 20 points overall, 6 of 15 from the floor, however, and just 1 of 5 from 3-point range. He
Did you
did
see
manage.
any quotes about the free throws or anything after the game? Because I was in the Heat presser.
I did not see anything
Nothing.
about that.
He didn't
No,
next
so
question somebody.
no,
That was
no.
ridiculous.
He did get 7 free throw attempts, and he hit all 7 of those. A lot of those felt
Yeah.
like they were pretty ticky tack fouls, but that's just the nature of what James Harden does, and he's pretty
This is what it
effective
is,
at
yeah.
it. It has been for a long time. The shot making, or at least the lack of shot making, that's certainly a testament to Miami's defense, and I think it's starting to get that kind of recognition that we've been talking about for a couple of weeks. Because the question mark, or not the question, but the comments about the Heat and the Atlanta series was all about, oh, Trae Young is struggling, not about Miami putting the clamps on him. I think now you're starting to see that James Harden is struggling with this. I guess it's offset to some degree by Tyrese Maxey's big night, but that's a whole other story. We'll talk about that in the next
Well, I'm
segment.
glad you bring up Harden. I'm glad you bring up Harden too, because he was doing the mismatch thing with Max Strus early in the game, and Strus was so solid. He's getting another nut of butter. I don't know how many we have left. None. I don't know. He's getting another butter from Doc Rivers' stash because
there you go. In that
he was
case,
he was so solid, and it's notable that he was a plus 13, second highest on the team behind Bam, who's the plus 15, who has all of the nutter butters now. Strus was really good. Deserves a shout out.
I'm not going to eat crow because we've talked about this before. His defense has improved. That was not the case earlier in the season when I said Duncan was a better defender. Duncan was a better defender. That's not the case anymore. Strus has been fantastic, moving his feet well, holding his own on a couple plays. He got called for a foul once when Tyrese Maxey drove to the lane, and he got all ball on that, and it was ridiculous. He's been really, really good at holding his own. He's been a really, really good help defender as well. He anticipates, got quick hands, and I think he's going to continue to get better. This is why they brought him on this team, is because he did have injury issues early on, but he was a good shooter, obviously, aggressive, athletic, explosive, and he has been able to tie all those things together. Just another great developmental project for the Miami Heat. But we'll talk about the other side of things, because, of course, the Philadelphia 76ers are still a good team. and Joel Embiid's return does loom large. So we'll see how that could potentially change the series on Friday. But before we do that, just wanted to tell you about a little family-owned business that's been serving auto parts customers online for 20 years. That's rockauto.com. Look, you can go to a traditional chain storefront, see if they happen to have the auto parts you're looking for. They'll look it up on their computers. They get into this kind of question back and forth whether you feel uncomfortable, embarrassed. You don't know what you're talking about. They ask you whether or not what specific model you have. It's just more complicated than it needs to be. Why go through all that when they're just going to look up the parts they happen to carry on their computer? You've got a computer at home or in your pocket, which means you've got access to rockauto.com. Again, they've been serving auto parts customers online for over 20 years. Their website's so easy to use, so easy to navigate. Just a few clicks, so you can save time. And more importantly, you can save money because their low prices are the same for everybody. So go to rockauto.com right now, get all the parts available for your car or truck, and then go to the section that says, "How'd you hear about us?" and write the phrase "locked on" so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. That's rockauto.com. Just a reminder that you can always reach us via email at lockedonheat@gmail.com or via Twitter using the hashtag AskLOHeat. Be sure to please subscribe to the show and leave a review. Thanks so much for sticking with us and for getting the best coverage of the Heat playoffs. By subscribing to our show, we'd love to get your feedback as well, so make sure you reach out to us at any point, and we'll always answer questions in upcoming mailbag episodes, etc. And stay tuned for a special episode by my co-host, Wes Goldberg. He put together a really nice show that's going to be broadcast later. It's going to be published later on this week about Tyler Herro, the Sixth Man of the Year. I think you'll all really enjoy it. It's something a little different. It's a narrative type podcast that Wes put together. So I wanted to shout that out and make sure to stay tuned for that. And the best way of doing that is by subscribing so you get it delivered directly to you and you'll find out exactly when that show goes live. But in any case, we also want to talk about Game 3 on Friday because, of course, the Heat are traveling to Philadelphia. And the expectation, at least from a lot of people in the Miami Heat, is that Joel Embiid will return. Now, Doc Rivers was a little bit more coy about it. He was asked about the potential return, I believe, by Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald. And Doc said, look, he's got to go through a lot of different steps. He's got to clear a lot of these different steps in order to play. And I don't know that he's even started. So it's somewhat iffy whether or not he's available for Game 3 or not. But I think this feels pretty do or die for the 76ers. Like, they're not completely out of it, but it just doesn't seem like without Embiid that they have any realistic chance of winning because Embiid is that kind of player. He is an MVP candidate. And when you have strong performances like you did tonight from Tyrese Maxey, who was sensational, particularly in his transition offense, just being able to get past primary defenders, secondary defenders with his elite burst of speed, able to get to the cup with ease, especially in transition. When you have some really great shooting from Tobias Harris, because he's been arguably their best player throughout the first 3 games of the series. And then, of course, you've always got the potential of Harden catching somewhat of a fire, especially if there's a big body like Embiid's out there to take some pressure off of Harden and to just draw the defenses, because that's exactly what he'll do. He commands double teams on many occasions. You don't want Bam to get into foul trouble with trying to guard Embiid, et cetera. So at least that's how I see it. Again, Miami looks really, really good. To our point about what we said in Game 1, I don't think they've played their best game yet, and they still managed to find a way to just subdue the 76ers. They just knock them upside the head and keep coming in waves. And next thing you know, Philadelphia they can't hang. They just sort of give up because they don't have enough firepower to contend with this Heat team that's as deep as they are. But then they get the return of Embiid potentially on Friday, and that changes things, at least from my perspective. What do you think, Wes?
I mean, it changes things a lot. Joel Embiid is their best player, and it's not close, right? And all of a sudden, he's a little bit of a force multiplier, like you said, right? He takes up so much space and requires so much attention from a defense that things are a little bit easier for James Harden. Tyrese Maxey's not the second guy or even the lead guy in some instances. Now he's playing, the third. He's the third guy on offense. That opens up all the cutting lanes and all the things that they want to do with him that they can't really do without Joel Embiid right now. Embiid's also a really great passer out of the low post. I mean, he does so much for them offensively. And then defensively, we're talking about a pretty good defense with Joel Embiid and a defense that without Joel Embiid has a defensive rating that would rank worst in the NBA. That is a huge difference. And it's the reason why Miami has been able to score essentially at will for 2 games. Joel Embiid changes a lot. And Eric Spoelstra was asked about this after the game, and he called it a dramatic shift. if and when Joel Embiid returns. The bigger question is whether or not it matters, I guess, because this is a series where a lot of people coming in were picking either the Heat or the Sixers in 7 games, right?
Yeah.
With having factored in a relatively healthy Joel Embiid despite the thumb ligament injury. You're now basically giving the Heat 2 games. You're kind of handicapping the Heat 2 games now as the
Yep.
series goes back to Philadelphia. I have a really hard time thinking that Joel Embiid, and we don't know what he's going to look like. I mean, this is a really
Yeah.
tough injury. He's going to have to wear a mask that can bother him. He's still
Right.
dealing with the hand thing.
I think
You know,
Chris Haynes on the broadcast, for those that didn't watch the game or
yeah,
were there at the FTX Arena, mentioned that he texted Embiid and that this is like the first time he's even been able to use the phone because the glare of the phone has been too much for him and leads to headaches. Like
right.
that's
It's there's bright lights in this arena. That could be a problem.
yeah,
Yeah. So either way, I mean, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough going, but it is certainly a factor. The Heat are preparing as if Joel Embiid will play
yep,
Friday night. That's
yep,
the only way to go. Eric Spoelstra just basically said it would be irresponsible not to prepare as if that were going to be the case,
right,
and we'll see. But like we talked about, he's a huge factor. I don't know, but we don't know that he's going to be 100%. And
right.
even if he was 100%, winning 4 of the next 5 for Philadelphia is going to be really tough with the way that the Heat are playing.
Yeah. I'll go one step further and say that Miami has to win game 3. Not maybe not necessarily, but you don't want to give them any life. You want to be able to take advantage of Embiid. We've seen this from him before. Even when he first hurt his thumb, there was some hesitancy in his game there, and it led Toronto to be able to creep back into
Yeah.
the series. If he's out there at 50, 60, 70%, whatever, not 100%, because he won't be at 100%, Miami has to pounce. This has to be the killer instinct that this team has displayed all season long,
Yep.
and they've got to take advantage of it because they don't want to be able to inject any kind of energy. Look, let them steal game 4 if they have to, but Miami has to go in there and take game 3, take a 3-0 series lead, and then just put them to bed in Miami for game 5. And I think that's exactly the strategy for this team. Any other lingering thoughts about this team and Embiid's return?
No, I just think, you got to keep doing what you're doing if you're the
Yep.
Heat. Joel Embiid obviously impacts a lot of what this team or what the Philadelphia 76ers can do.
Yep.
But if you're the Heat, I still think you have the right game plan. I think you do a good job typically doubling from the corners, from the weak side, from the strong side. If being opportunistic defensively and on offense, we could still get Kyle Lowry back at some point. That's still sort of
Yeah.
lingering in the air for the Heat. But if you're Miami, keep doing what you're doing. Obviously, you have to prepare for Joel Embiid, but it's not like they haven't played against him before. They'll be all right.
Yeah, the Heat are not practicing on Thursday, so they'll probably be traveling to Philadelphia. I wonder if Lowry will be going there. We'll hear soon enough. I mean, he'll travel just because he's from the area anyway, so he'll probably travel. Whether or not he intends to play, we probably won't find out until Friday morning. But that'll do it for today's episode of Locked On Heat. Make sure to again subscribe to the show so you can get all the great content that you're looking for as we continue to cover the Miami Heat better than anybody. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NBA. From the first jump ball of the play-in tournament to the last possession of the NBA Finals, where Miami will certainly be. Locked On experts take you deep inside the playoffs with insight and analysis affecting all 30 teams. This is David Ramil signing off for now. Thanks so much for joining me from FTX, Wes.
You got it. Wrap it up, B.